life, I believed respect was something you earned quietly. You showed up. You paid your share. You carried weight without announcing it. That belief shaped everything about me. My work, my marriage, even the way I loved. My name is Caleb Morris, and for a long time, I was the kind of man people underestimated without even realizing they were doing it. My wife, Lauren Morris, used to say she admired that about me. She liked that I didn't compete for attention, that I didn't need to be the loudest voice in the room. When we first met, she called it grounding, said I made her feel safe. But admiration can rot when it's fed by comparison. Lauren loved energy, applause, being seen. Over time, the same calm she once leaned on started to bore her. She began craving something sharper, someone louder, flashier, easier to show off. I noticed a shift before I ever suspected betrayal. She started dressing differently for errands that didn't require effort. Her phone became a private extension of her body, always locked, always face down. She laughed more, but never with me. Conversations at home turned transactional. What needed paying? Where we needed to be? Who we needed to impress? Intimacy faded first, not physically, but emotionally. The warmth disappeared. Touches became brief. Eye contact shorter. When I tried to talk, she'd smile and say I was overthinking. So I stopped asking questions. Instead, I watched. Lauren's parents, Robert and Diane Whitmore, were always around. They lived comfortably, very comfortably. A large home they never could have afforded on Robert's pension alone. Renovations that seemed to happen overnight. New appliances. Landscaping. Repairs that never waited. They never thanked me directly. Lauren handled all the conversations. I just made sure the transfers went through. That was my routine. Early mornings, long workdays, quiet dinners, late nights reviewing accounts. I worked in financial risk consulting, helping companies avoid collapse. Ironically, no one ever thought much about how well I understood money until it stopped moving. Lauren, meanwhile, had her own routine. Yoga in the mornings, meetings in the afternoons, social events at night where I was increasingly optional. One name kept popping up, Derek Harlan. She said he was a colleague, a connector, someone who knew people. He showed up at gatherings, always confident, always charming. He laughed loud, touched arms when he spoke, looked at Lauren like she was the most interesting thing in the room. I saw how she leaned toward him without realizing it. That's when desire stops being innocent. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse. I started keeping notes instead. Dates, times, patterns, quiet confirmations that didn't require confrontation to be real. By the time the party invitation came, hosted at a friend's place, full of people Lauren wanted to impress, I already knew what my marriage had become. Still, I went, because part of me needed to see how far it had gone. Before we left the house that night, Lauren barely acknowledged me. She adjusted her dress in the mirror, checked her phone, smiled at something I wasn't meant to see. Try not to disappear into a corner tonight, she said casually. People like energy. I nodded. At the party, she barely stood beside me, drifted from group to group like she was unencumbered. Derek was there too, closer than a colleague should be. Familiar, comfortable. Her parents arrived later. Lauren lit up when they walked in. Introductions were loud, proud. I stood just behind her, invisible by design. That was when I understood something clearly for the first time. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her background. And backgrounds don't get defended when the joke lands. Not long after, someone raised a glass and asked how Lauren managed to balance everything. She laughed, gestured vaguely toward me across the room, and made a comment that cracked the atmosphere open. People laughed. Her parents laughed. I didn't. I smiled once, calmly, like a man making a decision he'd already prepared for. I picked up my jacket, and I walked out. I didn't go home that night. Not because I was angry, but because I needed silence. The kind of silence that lets truth surface without interruption. I checked into a small hotel on the edge of downtown, the kind of place built for people passing through, not settling in. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and polish. Anonymous. Clean. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, and finally checked my phone. 32 notifications. Lauren's messages came in waves, confused at first, then irritated, then sharp. Where did you go? That was embarrassing. You didn't need to make a scene. You're being dramatic. Not once did she ask if I was okay. That told me everything. I opened my laptop instead, logged into accounts I managed quietly for years. I reviewed transactions like a man, reading his own autopsy. Calm, clinical, undeniable. Mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, monthly transfers labeled as family support. Her parents' house ran on my discipline, my planning, my restraint, and they laughed. I didn't shut everything down at once. That would have been loud, obvious, emotional. I reduced limits, paused automated transfers, flagged approvals. Then I sent a single email to Mark. Initiate separation protocols. Freeze joint discretionary assets. Prepare disclosure timeline. His reply came within minutes. Understood. I'll handle it clean. Sleep came late, but when it did, it was heavy, uninterrupted. The next morning, I woke up to a voicemail from Diane Whitmore. Her voice was different than usual. Tight, uncertain. Caleb, hi. There seems to be an issue with the house payment. The bank said something about a delay. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove back to our home just before noon. Lauren's car was already there. She was pacing when I walked in, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp and impatient. When she saw me, she stopped mid-sentence. I'll call you back, she said, hanging up. Her eyes flicked over me, checking for anger, weakness, guilt. She found none of it. So, she said, crossing her arms, are you done sulking? I set my keys on the counter. I left because I didn't want to say something irreversible. I replied calmly. She scoffed. You always do this. You withdraw. You make everything bigger than it needs to be. I looked at her then, really looked. The woman in front of me wasn't cruel in the way people expect cruelty to look. She was polished, controlled, comfortable. She'd learned how to diminish without raising her voice. I didn't make anything bigger, I said. You did. In front of everyone. She rolled her eyes. It was a joke. No, I said quietly. It was a summary. That made her pause. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've been practicing that version of me in your head for a while. I replied. Last night was just the first time you said it out loud. Her jaw tightened. You're being sensitive. I nodded once. Maybe, or maybe I finally noticed. She turned away, grabbed a glass from the cabinet, filled it with water she didn't drink. Look, she said softer now. You know how my parents are. They tease. Everyone does. You don't need to take it personally. I didn't, I said. I took it seriously. That was when her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, then turned it face down on the counter. Too fast. Too practiced. Who's calling? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then, just work. I smiled faintly. Is Dare a part of that now? The silence that followed wasn't accidental. It was the kind that slips before someone regains control. She exhaled sharply. You're imagining things. No, I said. I'm confirming them. Her eyes hardened. You went through my phone? I didn't need to, I replied. Patterns tell stories. She laughed once, forced, brittle. So what? You think I'm unfaithful now? I think you stopped being present a long time ago, I said, and I think someone else noticed. She stared at me, weighing options. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. You don't get to interrogate me, she said lightly. Not after disappearing like a child. I picked up my jacket again. I'm not interrogating you, I said. I'm disengaging. That's when her tone shifted. What does that mean? It means the systems you never had to think about are no longer automatic, I said. It means comfort now requires conversation. Her face drained of color. What did you do? I met her eyes. Calm. Steady. I stopped protecting people who don't protect me. She grabbed her phone immediately, scrolling fast, dialing numbers that went straight to voicemail. You can't just... Caleb, my parents are adults. I finished. So are you. That afternoon, the call started. Her father, her mother, her brother. Numbers I hadn't heard from directly in years. Voices were no longer amused. They were concerned. By evening, Lauren wasn't angry anymore. She was afraid, not of losing me, of losing what came with me. And that was when I understood something deeply satisfying. The joke had finally reached its ending. The first night, after everything began unraveling, Lauren didn't sleep. I know that because neither did I. We existed in the same house like strangers who'd memorized each other's footsteps. Every creak of the floor, every door opening or closing, carried a weight that hadn't been there before. The home felt different, not broken, just exposed, like the walls themselves had finally heard the truth. By morning, the illusion was gone. Lauren was sitting at the dining table when I came downstairs, phone in hand, untouched coffee cooling in front of her. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from exhaustion, the kind that comes from making calls that don't go the way you expect. My parents' bank flagged the account, she said flatly. They can't make the mortgage payment. I poured myself a glass of water. They'll need to speak with the bank. They already did, she snapped. They were told the funding source changed. I met her gaze. It did. Her voice rose. You can't just pull support like that without warning. I leaned against the counter, steady. I supported them as a courtesy, not an obligation. That house is their life, she said, standing up. You know that. So was my dignity. I replied. She froze. For a moment, the confident, dismissive version of Lauren flickered. In its place was someone calculating, running numbers, replaying conversations, realizing how much she'd assumed would never change. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, then looked away. You should answer that, I said calmly. She hesitated. It's nothing. It's Derek, I said. And it's not nothing. Her shoulders dropped. That was the moment. Not the confession, but the surrender. She sat back down slowly, rubbing her temples. You don't understand. I understand more than you think, I said. I just stopped explaining myself. She let out a shaky breath. He made me feel seen. I nodded once. I know. That startled her. You know. I know how often you stayed late, I said. How your tone changed when his name came up. How you laughed differently around him. She swallowed. It wasn't supposed to go this far. It always does. I didn't interrupt. I let her speak because people reveal the most when they think they're finally being honest. It started with talking, she continued. Work events. Drinks. Complaints. He listened. So did I said quietly. She winced. He told me you were holding me back, she said. That I deserved more. I smiled faintly. He needed to believe that. Her eyes snapped up. What's that supposed to mean? It means men like him don't chase women, I said. They chase opportunity. She shook her head. That's not fair. It's accurate, I replied. Did he ever invite you into his life? Or just in a moments that stayed hidden? She didn't answer. Because she knew. By noon, Derek's name stopped appearing on her phone. That's when panic replaced denial. She tried calling him. Left messages. Sent texts. Nothing. By late afternoon, her parents showed up unannounced. Diane walked in first, face pale, eyes scanning the house like it might vanish. Robert followed, jaw tight, pride stripped away by necessity. We need to talk, Robert said stiffly. I gestured toward the living room. Of course. They sat. Uncomfortable. Diane clutched her purse like it might protect her. The bank says the mortgage payment didn't go through, she said. They don't understand why. I met her eyes. They understand perfectly. Robert bristled. You're punishing us for a misunderstanding. No, I said. I'm correcting an assumption. Lauren stood near the doorway, silent now. For years, I continued. I covered expenses no one asked about. Not because I had to, but because I believe in family. Diane's voice trembled. We're family. I nodded. Families don't laugh when one of their own is reduced to a joke. Silence filled the room. Robert shifted. That wasn't meant to. It was meant to entertain, I said. At my expense. Lauren's mother looked at her daughter then. Really looked. For the first time, doubt crept in. What exactly happened at that party? Diane asked. Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it. I didn't need to fill the silence. The truth was already moving. That evening, Mark called. Derek Harlan has assets tied to one of your joint investment portfolios, he said. Nothing illegal, but interesting. Explain, I said. He's been using Lauren's proximity to you to position himself, dropping names, making introductions, presenting himself as connected. I exhaled slowly. And now? I asked. And now those doors are closing, Mark replied. Fast. I thanked him and hung up. Lauren watched me from across the room. Her confidence was gone now, replaced by something raw. He won't answer me, she whispered. No, I said, because he got what he needed. She stared at the floor. So that's it. You're just done. I thought about that. About the man I'd been. The silence I'd accepted. The jokes I'd swallowed. I'm not done, I said. I'm finished carrying things that were never mine to begin with. That night, Lauren packed a bag. Not because I asked her to. Because she could finally feel the ground shifting. And somewhere, far from our home, Derek Harlan realized he'd built his confidence on a foundation that no longer existed. The game he thought he was winning had ended, and the cost hadn't even fully revealed itself yet. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the house felt lighter. Not emptier, clearer. Lauren had left just before dawn. No shouting, no dramatic goodbye, just the soft click of the door and the sound of her car pulling away, tires humming against the street like a decision finally made out loud. I stood in the kitchen holding a mug of coffee I didn't drink, watching the steam curl upward. For the first time in a long while, my chest didn't feel tight. It felt steady. The call slowed that day, not because people stopped caring, but because they finally understood that persuasion wouldn't work anymore. Diane called again around noon. Her voice was different now. Careful. Polite. We didn't realize how much pressure you were under, she said. Lauren didn't explain things clearly. I almost laughed. I didn't ask to be understood. I replied. I asked to be respected. There was a pause. Then, quietly, is there any way we can fix this? I looked out the window at the quiet street. Some things don't need fixing, I said. They need ending. When we hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt resolved. That afternoon, Mark confirmed the paperwork was moving quickly. Assets untangled. Accounts separated. Boundaries formalized in language that didn't allow emotional reinterpretation. Lauren tried calling once. I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty, but because the version of me she needed no longer existed. I heard about Derek later that week. Through mutual acquaintances. Through professional whispers that traveled faster than apologies. His invitations dried up. His meetings got postponed. His name stopped opening doors. People who once laughed at his stories now smiled politely and excused themselves. When you build your presence on borrowed influence, it disappears the moment the source withdraws. Lauren moved in with a friend temporarily. Her parents started negotiating with the bank, adjusting expectations, learning what life looked like without invisible support. No one laughed anymore. And oddly, that was enough. A week later, I attended a small dinner, work-related. Different crowd, different energy, no performances, no need to impress. Someone asked me about my recent changes. I smiled and said, I simplified. They nodded, like they understood more than I'd said. Because sometimes growth isn't loud. Sometimes it's just walking away when you're finally done being the punchline. I didn't hate Lauren. That surprised me. What I felt was clarity. She didn't fall out of love. She fell into comfort and mistook it for entitlement. And I let that happen longer than I should have because I believed silence was strength. I was wrong. Strength is choosing yourself without needing witnesses. A month later, I sold a house. Downsized. Relocated. New routine. New mornings that didn't start with tension. I started running again. Cooking for myself. Sleeping deeply. Peace is a way of rearranging priorities. One evening, as I locked at my new place, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I didn't realize what I lost until everything stopped working. I read it once. Then I deleted it. Because I finally understood something important. People don't miss you when you're gone. They miss what you quietly provided. And when that disappears, the laughter always fades first. I stepped inside, closed the door, and felt something settle into place. Not revenge. Freedom.